You're watching our Going Digital series. I am Shweta Kothari. Joining us today is Srinivas, who is a IIT-Kharagpur alumnus. Now, Srinivas Chillara is the managing partner and principal consultant with SwanSpeed Consulting. SwanSpeed tackles in non-trivial software development problems, both at managerial and technical levels. Srinivas also coaches software development teams on Scrum and test-driven development. He's been conducting both the trainings since 2006. He's the first person in India to do both of these and is also the first in Asia to conduct certified Scrum development course. Srinivas, thanks very much for taking time out. I want to first begin by asking you, what exactly do you do at SwanSpeed? Now, from what I understand, SwanSpeed tackles with non-trivial software development problems. If you could slightly explain what that means.
Yes, first of all, thank you for giving me a chance to air my views, so to speak. It's a pleasure talking to you. SwanSpeed, when we say non-trivial software aspects, so many companies deal with software and digital systems and so on in a wide spectrum of activity. Some of which is quite mundane, and on the other hand, it could be a real-time controller for a car, the engines and controls of a car, or that level of mission or safety critical systems. So when we talk about non-trivial software and non-trivial systems, it means things that are quite outside of the capabilities of the run-of-the-mill companies that deal with it. And there are plenty of them. So, I mean, we'd like to think that we place ourselves in the top couple of % of companies in terms of the kind of work we do. So things in terms of huge server-based systems, high performance, low latency, high throughput, things like this. That is on the pure software side, but on handling of projects as well, there are more sophisticated and fine-grained ways of handling software projects, which are in a pickle. One of our services is actually Project Rescue. So there are many places where the companies commission software, or they try to build some software and it takes months and months and years and nothing comes, and there's not even light at the end of the tunnel. And I've seen this firsthand. So we step in and fix both the management and the flow of work, as well as some critical technical parts, because unless the technical parts get tackled, all the management maturity and processes in the world don't actually result in a real outcome. So we do all of this sort of things. I mean, I'm sure there's much more to say, but I think that's a good start.
Okay. Now, you've been a Scrum coach since 2006, if I'm getting the year right. I want to understand from you, what exactly is Agile?
Well, interesting, because your question started off by saying Scrum coach, and then you moved into Agile. And in companies they often use these words interchangeably, and I think that's largely a mistake. So Agile is an umbrella term. It covers a bunch of different approaches and methodologies to software, each of which has been developed pretty much independently. And then the creators of these came together in 2001. And they found that they had a lot in common in terms of the general approach, and their methodologies had a lot in common. Each was different in its own way. They have their flavors. And Scrum is more in terms of execution of software projects or product development, and how to align people within the project, as well as stakeholders, external stakeholders, and the recognition that this alignment would not be perfect at maybe any given time, but if it's off center by a little, you can always correct it. And it's like riding a bicycle. If someone does it, it looks simple, but the very first time you try it is difficult, but it's of course possible. And when you ride a bicycle, you're not actually perfectly balanced all the time, but if you look at a small duration of time, you're all right. So it's called built-in instability. So that's Scrum. And extreme programming, which is another important member of the stable, so to speak, is much more oriented around core development practices for programmers and testers. This is really into the innards of software development on a minute-to-minute basis, what you do. So that's got a very different programming flavor to it. All these come under the Agile umbrella. People who wish to know more, they can go to a site called agilemanifesto.org, which brings together some of the commonalities between all these approaches. Scrum being one where I'm an expert, this is, like I said, it's a product and project execution framework to align people. This has origins in a few things, including the experience of some Japanese and American companies in the 80s.
Right. Something you mentioned, and very interestingly, you said I started with Agile, finished on Scrum. So Scrum essentially is a specific Agile methodology, and I'm not the only person to mix between the two. As a matter of fact, Srinivas, there's a lot of misinformation
Oh,
rather.
not at all. You're not the only one.
Right. Right. So
And it's completely pardonable in your case because first of all, maybe you arrived on the scene late, but also you're not from this field, so it's all right. But it's I mean, not so excusable for people who are leaders of companies to do this. Having said that, I must hasten to add that people who are very mature, who really understand these things well, they can combine XP and Scrum, extreme programming and Scrum, and other practices from other agile methodologies, and they can just, and because they know what they're doing, so they can mix all this. I mean, for example, uh, to really draw the analogy far, you can juggle. I'm sure there are people who know how to juggle, and there are people who know how to ride a bicycle. But I wouldn't advise trying both at the same time, but some people do that as well. So for such people, if they say agile, it's all right, but they're really in the minority. Most people use it as a word and very loosely. You see what happens is good ideas, they quickly take on a bodyguard of myths and misconceptions and myths. Uh, and at this, because of this, they at the same time promote as well as dilute uh, the essence of these um, approaches and practices. It happens all at the same time. Unfortunately, unless people are very careful and they go to the right sources, they're liable to just be left with all the buzzwords and the cool speak, so, and without results.
right. And if I were a business unit head, what advantages can I really gain?
Okay, if you're a business unit head and you need to run your business, and part or a lot of it is dependent on a software support as a business head, what you can get quickly using an approach like Scrum, for example, or extreme programming is what is called a MVP, minimum viable product fast. Uh, so you can launch the service to support your business. And I think there's a connection with digitization and digital economy and so on. And this this minimum viable product is not the whole product, but it's a part of it. And you can decide what constitutes a part of it as the product is being developed. In the waterfall world, first of all, the thinking was less in terms of minimum viable product. It was like, I want all of this. Many of the business unit heads said, I need to have all this. Just for a quick example, if you are building an accounting system, no need to do that these days, but if you are building an accounting system, you might think that I need to have all these features, including the end of year closing. But unless the end of year closing is, we are speaking now in March, unless the end of your closing is just a few weeks away, you don't really need it. If you're launching your service, let's say in August, your end of the functionality of end of your closing, you really need a few months down the line. So the rest of it, you can launch earlier. So it's about having functionality available earlier, which is critical or which is minimally viable. So that can happen earlier. And then for the other features, you can have options because in Scrum and XP and all these things, you build units of functionality or slices of functionality, like we like to call them. and you can mix and match and have them delivered at different times, and you can shuffle, so you can play with the costs and benefits on a feature by feature basis. Earlier, what used to happen was we used to have to decide on an entire project whether it's viable or not. You try to do a cost benefit analysis before you funded a whole project. Now you can pretty much fund projects even if they roughly look viable, and then as the little pieces come, you can keep deciding, okay, I've got this much of benefit. Do I need a little more? Yes. Okay. Build a little more. So it is about slicing up what you need and building it slice by slice or small bunches of slices by slices. So you open up options for a business unit head.
But I want to know, what is the reality of practice today?
The reality of practice is quite amusing, because there are some companies that are doing many of these practices to a very high standard. Some of them which, uh, like pioneers, like Hortonworks, they've been doing extreme programming and some practices of lean development, which is another sort of member of the agile stables. They've been doing these practices to a very high level for a long time. By long time, I mean 15, 20 years even. Uh, most most other companies are not close to this. They're very far away from this. Having said that, then Salesforce is another company. Nokia was a company that did very well. And Nokia is an interesting case because they used Scrum and other practices from XP to execute excellently, execute their product development and projects. But it didn't help them find, I mean, it did help them when they were at the top, but it didn't stop them from failing, because we have to understand that these methodologies also have limitations. They're not a magic wand to succeed in the world just by themselves. You need to have the right strategy. So I think they had a problem with the strategy, the business strategy. So that was about Nokia. Other companies, they talk a lot. The rhetoric is high. Uh, on the ground, I think they have a very long way to go. Many companies, and bits and pieces, there are companies that certainly take up many of these practices reasonably well.
Right. So I also want to know, before we close this, how does Agile actually help in going digital?
Oh well, one of our partners in SwanSpeed, Rajiv Dev, I think he will be able to throw a lot of light on digital, because he's an expert in digital transformation and so on. But what I gather is it's about supporting and getting your business to succeed using the SMAC, what is called the SMAC stack. SMAC stands for Social, Mobile, Analytics, and Cloud. And so all these are software-based capabilities. And these are changing. And basically what it means is, using these, you are able to respond to the market. You're able to roll out services and change the services in response to how the market uses or sees them or doesn't or ignores them. But you have got to respond. How do you respond? That means you've got to change functionality that has been hosted on the cloud, or you've got to change something on your mobile app, or in the way you are using your data, or your data collection and your analytics are giving you a message that you need to change something on your business flow. But to change it, you need, because digital transformation basically means that your business is being run using software. So you got to change the software you have. So that is how it is. I'll try to give a couple of examples here. One very simple example is in B2C businesses, very often when something is rolled out to the end users, there are a few choices in how things are presented to them. Let's take the case of an e-commerce site. When you click on an item to buy, you could be shown some 2 other items or 4 other items. There's a choice, right? So what does a company do? What does such a company do? So one of the ideas of lean startup, which is one of the agile frameworks again, is we actually roll out both. 2 at a time and 4 at a time. But we show 2 at a time to half the users who come to the site and 4 at a time to the other half. And then we monitor this over a small period of time and see which is more successful, which is having a better response from users. And then we keep that. This is called A/B testing, but you need a continuous integration and a continuous delivery, excellent pipeline of CI and CD to make this happen. So that is from, again, one of the agile practices from extreme programming. If you're a B2B company, so you don't have too many customers, you have few, but if you build a product, it's slightly different. How do you do this? So you have to build one product. You can't build 7 products. It's too expensive. You have to build one product, but you have to make it configurable. And configurable means being able to have slightly different kinds of functionality for different customers. So customization is easy. And for that, you need to have your software in a very modular, nice form, which is all supported by agile practices of extreme programming. So these support the digital transformation and the digital journey.
Right. Srinivas, thanks very much for your time. Thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.